Well, as you guys can see, I got my hat on, which means it's time to tackle another film in the Indiana film franchise as we lead up to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Today we're going to talk about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, released in 1984, directed by Steven Spielberg, yet again the sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Very excited to talk about this one because I got some thoughts. And for those of you who haven't seen one of my retro reviews, we're going to talk about this in a very open, spoilery way, but I'm at least going to give those of you who aren't familiar with it a little bit of a premise. So if you want to just hear that, pause the video, go watch the movie, come back and see my thoughts on the film that came out several decades ago. You're more than welcome to come back. Or if you want to just power on through because you've never seen it and hear my thoughts, that's cool too. Whatever. Here's the synopsis. So essentially, it's Indiana Jones. It's a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark. It takes place a year or so before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And essentially, it finds Indiana Jones, starts out in China, I want to say. I forget the name, the city right off the top of my head. But it's a great opening sequence. But he starts off there and then essentially finds himself in India with his sidekick Short Round. And then he's tagged along by a singer named Willie Scott. So upon crashing in India, it's up to Indy, Willie, and Short Round to investigate and find these magical, mystical stones and bring them back to the village in order for the village to prosper again. And there's a lot of shenanigans that end up going down as Indy has to deal with maybe a voodoo master. So that's essentially the plot. And so if you've seen this before, let's just get into it. I love the opening sequence of this movie. It is very fun. It kind of opens with a musical number, draws you in right away, and you're kind of like, all right, where's Indiana Jones come into this? And kind of in a James Bond-esque manner, he shows up in that cool white tux, gets himself into some shenanigans. I think this whole thing is great, and it's cool that the bar that they're in is actually named the Obi-Wan. I think it's like the Obi-Wan bar or something like that. Bar Obi-Wan. It's on the sign. And, they are escaping, and then they crash in India. So everything up to that point, that whole sequence before they get on the plane, even on the plane and before they crash, is some of the best stuff in the movie. And, Harrison Ford is great in the film. I think he's, the best part about this film. He continues to be this character at a very good level, but maybe lacks a little bit of the development we saw in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which makes sense because this is a prequel. Then you get Ke Huy Quan, who plays Short Round. And Ke Huy Quan obviously has been big lately because he obviously won an Academy Award this year for his portrayal in Everything Everywhere All at Once. He's phenomenal. And seeing him as a kid, I know a lot of people were always divided on Short Round as a character. I was actually really charmed by him this time around. In the past, I might have been annoyed by him, but I actually dug Short Round this time around, this rewatch I had. And you have Kate Capshaw, who plays Willie Scott. A performance that isn't terrible. I know it gets a lot of crap, I think, on the internet. I don't think it's bad per se, but it's definitely not great. There's elements of her character and stuff that happened in the movie with her that I like. Definitely stuff I don't like. The fact that she is more of a damsel in distress and is a bit annoying at times. She's no Marion Ravenwood from the first film. So she is her own character, but I just not really drawn into or dig her character that much, even though she does kind of have a playful thing with Indiana Jones, which to me feels weird and kind of like convenient. It never really feels all that developed, especially the way they meet in the opening scene and then how they do kind of get stuck together, but then it just feels like that romantic chemistry just doesn't really work 100% for me, but it is what it is. And after they fall out of the plane using a raft, which is a weird sequence that I was just kind of rolling my eyes at a little bit, but whatever. It was the 80s, portraying the 1930s. After that point, though, I get bored real quick during this movie. I'm not really digging where the story goes, what they have to do. It just doesn't really feel like the kind of Indiana Jones movie I'm into. I like the Indiana Jones that seeks out his mission, doesn't have the mission like dropped on him. Like this village tells him like, oh, you were brought here to us for a reason and all that stuff. And not that that's bad or a bad way to go about it. It just doesn't work for me quite that much. And so from there, I kind of mentally check out. Every time I try to rewatch it, it's like the same part where I'm just like, I'm just not feeling it. But there are stuff here and there as it goes along that, re-engages me, then it loses me. So, like, obviously the dinner scene is fun and great. The scene later on, with the riding in the coal mine cars, which is phenomenal. It's, a great set piece. Spielberg directing that scene, does a fantastic job. He knows how to direct. But I do feel like after the success and how great Raiders was, this is a definite step back, even for him. He still shows a lot of great, aspects of filmmaking in this, and that's what keeps this film maybe with a higher grade than what it probably sounds like I'm going to give it, and we'll get to that at some point. But I just feel like from the technical side, this film should be a lot better than it is. It's from the story and the characters and situations that just don't 100% land for me. So, like, after the coal mine cart scene, you have the great scene on that bridge. And those are really the highlights for me. I don't really care about the Kali Ma. I mean, okay, that scene in particular is great when he's reaching into the heart. That's pretty gruesome and pretty great. But everything else in there, I just can't latch on to. I'd probably nod it off a little bit again. Like, it just, every time, this film just isn't, it is no Raiders, and it is definitely no Last Crusade for me. And I can't wait to get to Last Crusade. But you have to go through this one. I don't know. It doesn't work for me as much. It just lacks, I think, the same kind of magic that first one had. While the charm and stuff is there, it just never fully lands. And it bums me out that I don't dig this movie as much as, the previous installment and the next installment. But, yeah. So, I guess those are my thoughts on Temple of Doom. I could sit here and BS and, probably talk more about what I don't like about it, but I don't like crapping on movies for fun. That's not fun. I hate dragging a film through the mud, but there's definitely stuff here I like, but I'm going to be honest with you, and I think this is the most boring of the Indiana Jones movies. Like, even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I will also get to, I find a little more entertaining and engaging than this, but filmmaking-wise, this is probably a better executed film, if that makes any sense. Like, I just feel like there's a lot of technical things they do here that work better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but I think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is probably a little more engaging than this film ends up being for me. So in the end, I'm going to give this film a B-. I know it sounds like this film should be a little lower based on how uninterested I am in it, but like I said, it's saved essentially by some good cinematography. The music is always great. John Williams, I don't think I mentioned this in the last video. John Williams' score for Indiana Jones might be the best cinematic scoring character theme ever. I love it. Every time it comes on, it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite themes, if not my favorite theme ever. So John Williams always knocking it out of the park. I think Harrison Ford does a lot of heavy lifting with this film, despite kind of a lackluster story, a nearly a pretty much a lackluster supporting cast in this one, despite how much I like Short Round. And Steven Spielberg does a lot of great stuff with some of the visuals and the mood, and that carries a lot of weight. But it's just when it comes down to that story and maybe some of the other directing choices of where the story goes or how characters are kind of brought together and their development just doesn't really work for me. So there you go. Anyway, what do you guys think? Where does Temple of Doom sit amongst your favorite Indiana Jones movies? Do you like this more than me, less than me? I'm very curious to know people's thoughts on Temple of Doom. I'm sure I'll probably even get a few people who say I'm crazy for falling asleep during this movie or nodding off during this movie, which, hey, it happens. So anyway, guys, if you could, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and the little bell notification to be notified whenever I drop new videos. It would be greatly appreciated. And I can't wait to get to the next Indiana Jones film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I'm very excited to talk about that one. And until the next video, guys, I'll be seeing you.